We're in chapter 29 of First Samuel. As we continue our study in this book, we are nearing the end of this part where Saul's reign ends and David's begin. We're in chapter 29. We saw in chapter 28 where there's a battle by the Philistines, a massive army of the Philistines have come together, has formed to go against Israel. And we see Saul running in fear because he can't hear from God. He's seeking an answer from whatever avenue possible. And the only avenue and place available to him that he thinks is the witch of Endor. And so we see him going there on our last reading, and God answering him in judgment as to what is the outcome. He wanted to know what he must do, but instead he's confronted with what would happen to him. In other words, he didn't get an answer as to what he must do. Because of course we know he went for a favorable answer and what to do to win this battle. But instead he's being told by Samuel that he would lose his life. In other words, whatever Samuel had said to him previously about the kingdom and about his disobedience, nothing had changed. Neither in what God was going to bring upon him, nor in his attitude and his heart towards God. So we come to chapter 29. It's fairly short, so we're going to try to get through it quickly and go into chapter 30. Now the Philistines gathered together. This is 1 Samuel chapter 29. Now the Philistines gathered together all their armies to Aphek, and the Israelites pitched by a fountain which is in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines passed on by hundreds and by thousands. But David and his men passed on in the rearward with Achish. Then said the princes of the Philistines, "What do these Hebrews here?" And Achish said unto the princes of the Philistines, "Is not this David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, which hath been with me these days or these years, and I have found no fault in him, since he fell unto me unto this day?" And the princes of the Philistines were wroth with him. And the princes of the Philistines said unto him, "Make this fellow return, that he may go again to his place which thou hast appointed him, and let him not go down with us to the battle, lest in the battle he be an adversary to us. For wherewith should he reconcile himself unto his master? Should it not be with the heads of these men? Is not this David, of whom they sang one to another in dances, saying, Saul slew his thousands and David his 10,000s? Then Achish called David and said unto him, "Surely as the Lord liveth, thou hast been upright, and thy goings out and thy coming in with me in the host is good in my sight. For I have not found evil in thee since the day of thy coming unto me unto this day. Nevertheless, the Lord's favor thee not. Wherefore now, return and go in peace, that thou displease not the lords of the Philistines." And David said unto Achish, "But what have I done? And what hast thou found in thy servant so long as I have been with thee unto this day, that I may not go fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" And Achish answered and said to David, "I know that thou art good in my sight, as an angel of God. Notwithstanding, the princes of the Philistines have said, He shall not go up with us to battle. Wherefore now, arise up early in the morning with thy master's servants that are come with thee. And as soon as ye be up early in the morning and have light, depart, So David and his men rose up early to depart in the morning to return into the land of the Philistines. And the Philistines went up to Jezreel. Now, if you'll notice, this battle is taking place again when we first saw David early on this chapter, in chapter 2, I think it is, where they were fighting in Aphek. That was the beginning. Now we see here the closing of this battle, and it was a massive battle then. And it was that battle over there, and when the ark was taken. Judges say, when the ark of the covenant was taken. And so we saw what took place then, how the Israelites were slaughtered in that battle. That was in Judges. When with Eli's sons, remember when they sent for the ark, thinking that would help them to win. And at the end of that, we saw Eli lose his life. His sons died in that battle, all in judgment, according to what God had already spoken. Now we come back here again, in fact, with a massive army again. And we see now in this battle, we'll see where not only would Saul die, but also all his sons and his army. And so we see another great slaughter of the Israelites. They had a slaughter during Eli time. This will be another slaughter, and all because of disobedience. Saul, we saw where they asked God for a king. They wouldn't change from that, and they got their king to fight their battle. He started out well, and now we see the king again, bringing them into battle. And mind, they were told what would take place if they asked for king. But on all of this, when you watch this spiral downward with Israel, all because of disobedience of their king. And we even see with their disobedience also. And so God brings judgment to Israel's king and Israel's army. Because of course, if the king is not in obedience to God, he's going to lead the people in that same direction. Because we saw where he said he was supposed to kill everybody with the Amalekites. And he's saying, oh, the people's as if, but you're the king, you know? And so that continuous downward trend of this king has brought them now to this place where it's so pitiful, especially when we get to the other chapter and go into that. And also we see what it has led because of the actions of the king, where David is now in enemy territory, and it seemed like David is now a part of these Philistines. But we know from what we saw how David was performing, we could almost safely assume that David would have done just what these lords of the Philistines have said. So this great battle, now we see why Saul was so fearful and went to the up there at Endor trying to seek help, not so much to turn to God, but just for God to get him out of his stick. But we'll see God in this battle, even in what is being said here, intervening on David's behalf. Because what would David have done? Again, now we know God could slaughter them with that, but God chose to use different methods. Because David could very well have gone into that battle and won the battle, but this battle was supposed to turn out the way it turned out because of Saul's disobedience. So we see this battle is one of judgment upon Saul. And so here the princes, the Philistine army marching against, which seems so strange because they're going with this massive army to slaughter the Israelites. And here you got coming up at the rear, the worst part of the battle, that you want anybody at your back, and this is where, because Achish is so taken with David, that he could see no wrong in David. Remember, we say now David also, we don't want to lose sight that David is also still a type of Christ. And so we see things, even in statements that are said towards him, that was said about Jesus Christ when he came. I find no fault with him. Remember, just before his crucifixion, I find no fault with this man. They couldn't find anything wrong. Now we see the same statement being said to David, but we know what was going on behind the scenes. Achish, of course, Achish didn't know. And as far as Achish was concerned, David was a faithful servant to him. Because David is so far away from where he's staying. Remember, David said, oh, don't let me stay in the royal city with my Lord. Let me go to the outskirts. And so where David was, it was such a distance that Achish could not have known exactly what David was doing. And so he's depending on a narration of what went on in those raids. So David could mislead him. And we know that David had misled him to the point where even at this time, Achish still thinking David was fighting against his own people. And so that won his confidence, because he realized if David is fighting against his own people, he can't go back over there. So he would remain a Philistine. And if you recall one time when Jonathan, I think it was Jonathan, when Jonathan fought the battle, it says that and the Hebrews who were with the Philistines began to fight against them. Exactly. So that's exactly what we could assume that David would have eventually done. And so it's just that where he say he went in and come out in the midst, we know that they had common enemies in that area, because even the tribes who David was raiding, David and his armies were raiding, they would also have been enemies of the Philistines too. But he could not tell him that, because he wanted to convince him to the point that it's his own people he had turned his back on. That would make him more endearing to Achish. And you wonder if Achish, these people are quoting the song that they sung when they slew their champion. And you figure, Achish, think about all of this. But I believe what happened, just like how you don't know what kind of ruler Goliath may have even been, but through Goliath being taken out, that made it possible for Achish now, I guess, to take this kind of reign. And also, you know how you say the enemy of my enemy is my friend? And so that could be the same thing. And so he's looking at David as a friend and a faithful servant. And we could also say, because we know the scripture said the heart of the king is in the hands of the Lord. He turned it out how he pleased. And so for Achish to be so blinded by this hero, he must not have known that the reason why David is an enemy of Saul, or Saul sees him as an enemy, is because David is so heroic, you know? And so these people who quoting this song may not have known that mine is all these great battles and victories that cause a problem with David and Saul. And so David is now here with his enemies and with the enemies of God. Now I believe that David would not have fought his people. He would have been expecting, I guess. We don't see him looking or calling on the Lord at this point, but because we know how the Lord has been working and how David's heart is always with the Lord, because even though he's here with the Philistines, he never turned away from God. He never, the way how Saul is so rebellious and disobedient to the voice of God. David is really in this town because he's running away from Saul. He does not want to fight against Saul. And so him even being in this battle looks like, now how is he going to keep covenant that he has made with, not only with Saul on the last time they spoke, but even with Jonathan, because Jonathan is also in this battle. And him and David have always been making covenants, and not only that, that's his best friend. So you really think David was going to fight his best friend, slaughter his best friend, or his king? I doubt it very seriously. Some people believe that he would have, but no, not at all. Not while we saw where he was in battles and saying, "Oh, is Judah we went up against," but they're showing you that it was not Judah; it was Judah's enemies. So fighting against Judah, Israel would have been like fighting against God. And so we know David wasn't about to do that. David was not about to do that, because that the first, if you remember with the battle with Goliath, he said, how dare he defy the armies of the Lord? Which in he realized if you could defy the armies of the Lord, that's the same as defying God. And so David was not going to go against his people. So these lords of the Philistines were quite right in what they were saying. Mhm. Mhm. Okay. I should tell you that. Where? That lock again. And so the princes of the Philistines asked, and they rightly asked, what are these Hebrews doing here? You could imagine that. That seems so strange because they go into battle against these people. They're marching towards these people. And here you are, got over about 600 of them or more here with you. You should start with them. You need to start slaughtering them. So it's like, how you figure? We going to battle. So what are you doing here? And guess what? That and all should have, if David them even had intentions of fighting against their own people, that alone should have brought them to repentance. It's like, you're a Christian, what you doing in a place like this? What are you doing here? Remember Elijah? What doest thou here? Who sent you up here on Mount Carmel? Who sent you to run away from Jezebel? What are you doing here? And so we can ask ourselves these kind of questions. And it's good if somebody, and when people ask you that, when you're in the wrong place, you get defensive. Sometimes you become embarrassed. Sometimes it brings you to repentance and you realize the embarrassment would lead you to move away from it. Some, it don't work. They become so defensive, then you realize, oh, I see why you're here. You ain't there no more. Not literally, even in heart, in testimony. And so we can ask ourselves the same question. Or people that we know and looked at as people of God, what are you doing here? What's going on? And that's why we're supposed to be our brother's keeper. Now, this is the enemy asking David, who has already been anointed as king. So you could imagine even what kind of what conviction that should have been for David himself. What are you doing here? And they say, what are they doing here? What are these Hebrews doing here? What you're doing among the Philistines? What are you doing here? What do these Hebrews here? But Achish was the one who defended them. Achish, the pagan, defended God's people. Even God have it so, hey, because had Achish not stood for David, David in particular, the way he did, you don't know what they may have done with David them. You see, they could have used them and even put them in bond, hold these as captives until, because we're going to fight their people. Why would we save them alive? Because everything that Achish is saying and would say about David is all that the Lords can say as to why they shouldn't be here. Man, David is thousands, Saul is thousands, and David is 10,000s. And then on top of that, think of it. If David is here because he's running away from his king, because they may not have known I don't think they knew the whole story as to why David and the king was at odds. But just like they say, how else to bring about peace between you and your enemy? Let him see now. Yeah. The best thing to do now, just how you presented him with the head of Goliath, give him these heads of these lords here. What else to turn Israel back? And not only that, protect David from King Saul. Because we remember the army protected Jonathan from King Saul. And so they could have used the same war to protect David from King Saul, but it wasn't to be, because this is the war that God would use, the final one. And so he's reminding, and he's trying to get Israel, get King Achish to look. And if you look at what these lords are doing with the king, well, with Achish, they're stirring up his mind and making him remember how dangerous, while he's looking at those same things that these fellas are looking at, as to why David is such an asset to them, to his army. These guys are causing him to look at it in a different way. That the same way you're looking at David as an asset to you, think of what could happen if he's trying to get back over there to his country. Imagine what a great victory this will be now for him to take all our heads off. Because not only is he a part of the army, but now you have him in such a strategic spot in the army. You're endangering all us. And so I believe they made their case well to the king, to the point where they ain't going into battle with this man, especially with him in the back. If anything, keep him up front. Let us keep our eye on him and let him be in the heat of the battle. And we could see how how he's battling up front there. But in the back, that's the worst place to have your enemy behind you. Because we see when they set ambush, how those ambushes used to be set up to surround the enemy and attack them from behind. And so these guys, even though they are speaking against David being there, to tell you the truth, they're speaking wisdom to their king. They're speaking, giving him good advice. And thankfully, he accepts it. But what we need to see in them telling the king this, and the king accepting it, it is an intervention from God. It's God intervening on David's behalf, because here it is. David done set this man up to see him and put him so high. And then David was to do nothing different than what these people said and turn on these people, because he was not going to fight against God and his army. And so God intervened to the point where he is sparing David, and because no telling how many of David's fellows would have gone down in this, which we believe, because we stand with how God has kept them. Because remember, they've been on the run now. This is rounding up some 10 years or so that they've been on the run. And not only were they on the run from Saul, but they were also engaging in battles. And if you recall, every time we hear about this number, we don't see this number decrease. It started out as 400 and it climbed to 6, and we never saw where that number decreased. I don't know if you noticed that, but every time it talk about David and his men, it talk about these 600, which shows that God had protected them all along, even in the enemy's camp. And see, when we see stories like this, it's not for us to use to say, oh, we could put our hand to evil as God children and God. No, it's showing us how faithful God is and how we don't need to put our hand to evil. David did not have to come into enemy territory to be safe from Saul. We know that. We don't even need to see a scripture that tells us that, because we done watch from the first time David ran up to now how God had been protecting him. And even now, David, right here, we don't know how afraid David may have been, but we have a psalm that I think is Psalm 16 that says, how God had preserved him. And no doubt this could have been what he is thinking about. Only God, but doesn't matter that he answered why I can't go. He could not joyful and say, oh, okay, because then the king would have known what these fellows were saying was right. So he had to act like he's disappointed in going to back that the king has turned him out, which in his disappointment, even if it was a sincere disappointment, it was disappointed to know that he would not be in the battle to help his nation. But we know that God is the one who has moved in this situation to cause these lords of the Philistine not to budge. Because when you look at it, how could they tell Achish what to do? He's supposed to be over them. Mind, he may have been under the 5 lords who are what, brothers? I think they were brothers to God. He may have been, I keep saying God, but I mean Goliath. Because we always heard about these 5 lords of the Philistines. And so he may have been under them, but he's over this army and they're not afraid to stand against him on this issue. They're not afraid, because even if they had stood against him on this issue or had not and allowed David them to be in, it was no reason why they did not have to start the battle with David them. Thousands and thousands of all of them. They could have done the same thing that David is doing. Let's get together, and this is how we could, before he said Hebrews, we could take out a those set back there. But they were afraid of David just as much as Achish loved David. They were afraid because of that song. Because for that song to have had taken place from David was must see 17, 18. And here it is, David must be almost 30 by now, and they still remembering this song as if it shows you that this probably is still being sung and danced to, not only over there in Israel, but even there in Philistine territory. Even there people singing this song because they know the words. They know the words. And so we see God intervening in this instance here, using the enemy to protect David them. And then we're going to see in the next chapter just what is happening, because when you read that, you'll be like, but even if they gone back, you mean David them just sitting down and wondering, knowing how strong this army is, they just wondered, they didn't decide to, you know what, let's just go into the army anyway. Let's cross back over there, because right now, Saul ain't gonna be able to come against us. Saul ain't gonna be able to come against us because he got to be leading the army against the Philistines. But we don't see that happening. We're gonna see in the next chapter why. And David them didn't know what was going on with this battle, because other things and all of this I look at as part of God's intervention and God's working things out to bring about the exact end as he expected, because here it is, he already sent a judgment against Saul and against the army. And so something have to take place. How is this going to work out? You understand? And then we're going to see that, how this take place in chapter 30. And so we see God through these Philistines sending David's army back. And the same time, it seems like when we read this and then we get to the next chapter, now these things happening. But while he's talking, while this is going on, all of this is going on, something else is taking place over there in Ziklag, David's territory. Because of course, David would be looked at as a king, right? Of Ziklag. He's the head. That's his city that Achish gave him. And so even with that, him going to battle as a king, some people believe, well, David could have gone to battle against Saul them, because now he's battling from a different position. He's not battling as a servant of Saul, but as a king of his own kingdom. But we know, no, that ain't gonna take place, because David never crossed sides, and David always considered Saul still to be his king. He's just hiding. He just using Ziklag as a hideout, the same way he was using the cave. Only this time it was a safer one, because Saul's so scared of these Philistines, he wasn't gonna cross over. And so we come to comments or questions. Any comments or questions? Chapter 30. And it came to pass when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day. This after he left from Achish, they're journeying back now to his hometown. And when they got there, they meet some bad news. And on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but they carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Now, part of saying what we're going to see here in this chapter is it could be the first time that we see David's men turn against him. Because all along, yeah, but we're going to see them turn against him. And we're going to see them in a state that we had never seen them. Well, outside when they first joined him, and they gave a description of who they are. We're going to see them in a different state right now. So it's almost like you watching them come full circle, and like this how it started. And like, wait, now what's going on here? Something is changing. And so even the way this army came into Ziklag, and even what they did, because here it is, they took everything, but they didn't kill anyone, which is strange, because there's ravaged the women, kill them. Somebody gonna leave head gonna leave behind, you know. But you know what we see in all this.
I guess David, you say David man turned against them because they figured if they were there,
Yeah,
it would not have happened. You know, they would be able to fight against this army would come against their people, even though none was killed.
Yeah,
but they were still taken away as as captive.
Yeah.
So hey, I out here fighting, and here it is. I'm not here to defend my family. Somebody else could, take over my family, and I am left alone. So I guess they say, well, if it wasn't for David, David was maybe there or let them go home, it would not have happened.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
If they turned against, if they had turned against David, then David was letting them down.
Yes.
All the while they put their life on the line for him.
Yeah.
There wasn't even thinking with their family.
Yeah, exactly. Because from the time we saw them, we've never seen where they were ever in.
So they have to go back to their family. They were always with him. So why at that point, they turned their back on, it was about to turn their back on him. And it wasn't like only part of the family was going. David went as well. So that's
everybody. They clean out. They just how David them leave.
Something it have to be God.
Yes.
Them.
Yeah.
Yeah. For good.
And so when you read David's Psalms and know that all of this experience is unleashed, all that emotion comes out, all those feelings comes out, and he's saying how it was only God who preserved him in the midst of all of this. Let me see if I could put, I didn't mark it. Sometime when you start talking, certain things come up there when you're looking at these. Don't cross your mind. Psalm 16 says, preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust. O my soul, thou hast said unto the Lord, thou art my Lord. My goodness extended not to thee, but to the saints that are in the earth, and to the excellent in whom is all my delight. And so we see David call it, realizing that it was only God who preserved him, because this is the first time we're going to see David's army turn on him to the point where they're ready to stone him to death, because they don't stone you just for stoning's sake. They're looking to kill you because their whole life now is being threatened, which and they never experienced that under David before. And on top of that, they're with the army. How you thinking we're going to battle with the Philistines? This was not their intentions. All that is why I believe that was never his intention. But when these people see what took place, because while they playing fiddlesticks, their people, their land left unprotected, even if he had left some of them there, but no, you have to go through all of this. And now what's going to happen? Because they're thinking now, the city's on smoke. They don't know what has become of their people, because the fact that they took everybody means they were going to take them when they don't do what they please with the females. They were going to sell them into slavery. So they're thinking they're not going to ever see these people again. You understand? And on top of that, we're going to see a description of David's men that we didn't see before, which would show you why this could happen. And show you that even with all of this, it was God who was overall protecting them, keeping them, shielding them for David's sake. Because remember what David said when Abiathar came over to the cave to him to bring news as to what Saul had done with the rest of the priests. David said, with me, you are safe. Come, be with me, stay with me. With me, you will be safe. With Christ, you are safe. Once you come to Christ, just come to Christ, depend on him, look to him, and live. And we see that with David and these people who are with him. Every time 600 men. Oh, what? None of them, none died, none, what? And then as we go into other books, we'll see where not only was God protecting them, God was even sending help to them. So we come across, as we continue to read, the same thing happening when we were over in those other books where things are added. You get more information as to what was taking place back then. That is what we see that nothing changes as we go on. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and his people that were with him, look at this, lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. Heartbroken, distraught. All that they basically were living for and doing all this for, gone. Because they know they're going to get it back. They don't know that they're going to see their sons and daughters again. All of that, and for what? And lost at whose hand? All the time they were running from Saul, destruction come from somewhere else. And who it come from? Those same people who were supposed to have been destroyed by Saul and was not. And on the last study we saw where that was brought back up. God sent you to kill the Amalekites and you didn't do it. He told you to destroy them. Now look at what's happening. And every now and again we see an Amalekite popping up here, popping up there. And not to help Israel, to destroy them. And so these men began to weep. Big, strong warriors began to weep. And David's 2 wives were taken captive, Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the wife of Nabal, the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed. Remember this word when he first met his men? They were in the same position. For the people spake of stoning him. These warriors, these distressed men, these without hope, who he was able to bring hope to. Speaking of destroy it, huh? Ready to turn hand on their Lord, on their Savior. It looked like everything that the disciples hoped for in Jesus, and he was, what happened? They were all ready to turn their backs on him. All ready to turn their backs on him. And so the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. You see? But David encouraged himself in the Lord. From David going into Philistine territory, we see David calling on the Lord. Wasn't until this point that we see David. All of this, and sometimes it takes things like this, because when he was getting ready to march against Israel with the Philistines, we don't see him calling on the Lord to say, "Oh Lord, get me out of this." We know that David must have had something up his sleeve. David ain't no dummy. But here, when he realized this, he is now without anything, or everything was gone from him. He didn't have his family with him anymore. Even now, the men who had joined him are all turning their backs on him now. Who we have now? Only the Lord. Only the Lord. And God allowed this to take place. To see, this is one of the reasons why when the saints go, and even though we learned this lesson like we should yet, anytime you see people of God begin to behave like the pagans, the Lord has given directions as to how to deal with that. Why? To bring them back. Here, David was running away from Saul because Saul was determined to do what? Kill him. Now, he ran away to the point now where we don't see nothing of God. We don't see David calling for the ephod. We don't see David calling on the Lord during this stunt in Philistine until when he get to this place. Everything now, God done. Come on, we gotta. Let me help roll back the curtain. He didn't catch himself when the lords of the Philistines say, "What are these Hebrews doing here? They shouldn't be here." That was David, their opportunity to go grab their people and head back home. Our army need us. He didn't catch himself there. And so now when it came to the point where the people, who even though we know he was being deceptive with Achish now can't even help him, because Achish tell him, "Go back. And not like it, you have to go back, and go peaceably. Don't upset them any further. Go peaceably." So now he realized Achish can't even protect him right now. He leaves with his army, and when the conditions that they meet, he realized the very people that he was protecting and sheltering all this time and encouraging, now they're ready to do the same thing he was running away from Saul. Now here it is, his life is right back on the line. And this time he really don't have nowhere to turn. But he remembers something. He remembered the Lord, and he began to encourage himself in the Lord. He began to strengthen himself in the Lord. And so he had to look in deep, to look up. And so when we find ourselves in the same, because long as we know where somewhere we could turn, and we could even turn to ourselves, because that's what David was doing. David was turning to himself to bring deliverance, turning to himself for protection, even though he was only thinking about Saul, because he didn't expect all of this to transpire like this. And now that he's at this point where it's nowhere for him to look to, no one for him to look to. His wives are gone, his children are gone. These fellas' wives and children are gone. And like that, the one man who they could have depend on to protect, done let them down. They're ready now to put him to death. And he remembered the one friend that he had, the friend that sticks closer than a brother, the only savior he knows. And he began to encourage himself, to strengthen himself. And that's how he got built up, by turning to the Lord. He couldn't turn to these men, because these men, so the fact that they done use all their strength, crying out and weeping and wailing, I know how they even had strength to stone him. Because they said until they had no strength left, they cry and weep until they were weak. And so the next bout of strength they had was going to be to put David to death. Not to decide, you figure they should have come together and decide how we gonna find our people. The thing is, these people have done take all that they had, burn down what they couldn't carry, which was the city itself, burn it down, that these men didn't know which way to go. Did they go this way? Where do we start? Hopeless. They didn't even know which direction, but David remembered. David came to himself. David came to himself. And in the midst of that, and this is where we have to learn our lesson from David too, in these situations. When David get desperate, real desperate, and do foolish things, he get more desperate, and he realized in that desperation only one way to turn: to God. And David began, and this is the difference. This is the difference between David and Saul. David didn't say, look, we in Philistine territory, where they're God. Let's find Dagon. Let's find a witch or something. He never does that. We don't even see David calling at this point for the ephod, though he calls for it, because that's how God answered them through. But it has come the time when you can't call that prayer band together. You've got to remember God on your own. But Saul never did. When Saul got to the point where the prophets couldn't speak to him and he had no dreams, he decided he going to them other people who just make dreams. The dream maker said then, and he goes to the witch of Endor. David goes to the Lord. David, and he remembers some things that every time he got down, God had somebody come and remind him. When he got in those positions where he began to walk in the flesh, God had somebody to remind him. Even though while he was in the flesh and walking among the Philistines, he was so blinded he couldn't even hear that what this man is saying is a remembrance. But this is God drawing your attention. What are you doing here? Why are you here? That was like God asking, what you doing here, David? We saw when he was down and discouraged, God sent Jonathan. Saul couldn't find him, but Jonathan found him. When he was down in distress, Saul couldn't, and his whole army of 3,000 couldn't find him, but David's family found him, and these were encouragements to him. And when he got down and hiding out, the enemy found him and didn't know they had found him. And God used that as opportunity. Then the enemy in pursuit of him, He found the enemy, and then we hear the enemy encouraging him in the Lord. And now here we have, after the pagans done say something and they ain't get him, now God have his very own men turn against him to turn him back around. And so he remembers the Lord and he began to strengthen himself in the Lord. And the way I believe David was strengthening himself in the Lord was through remembering what the promises. Look at the things God done promising. Look at how God has been with him. I believe his memory rolled way back to the time he was in his father's sheepfold, and he's singing those songs unto God and cheering up himself on his lambs, and he remembering the protection of God. And I believe that is what brought David and kept David focused, so David could call for the priest, call for the ephod. You have it there. It was available. It was always there, you know. He could have called for it even before he gone and joined Philistine army. Even when he had intended and got to the point where he said, you know what, Saul ain't gonna stop running for me. He could have called for the ephod then. It was available to him. He had the only ephod. Saul ain't had it. And so, but David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, see there, bring me hither the ephod. And so after he encourages himself in the Lord, where else it could point you to? It points him, there's the priest, because we need a mediator. And this is what this is showing us. We cannot come to God without our mediator. Saul tried to do it on his own, and it couldn't work. That's why he couldn't hear from the prophets. He couldn't hear from dreams. So he goes and finds his own medium, in the form of the witch of Endor. But David finds himself before the Lord, and he calls for the priest who was always available to him. But now, for the first time in look like over a year, David calls on God, because he finds himself between a rock and a hard place. And David said to Abiathar the priest, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought hither the ephod to David. And all of this is because this is happening like this. All of this is what stays them fellas. They couldn't stone him. Thank God they were too weak to grab up rock right now, but that was their intentions. But while they're doing that, see, while they're thinking how to fix their problem their own way, David is turning to the Lord. And so David turns to the Lord. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue? See, David ain't taking no chance. Shall I pursue? People gone with all your stuff. David is at such a point. See, when we talk with David, a man after God's own heart, the purpose and design that God have for his life, David's whole family, they done take inventory enough to see that ain't no bones here, nobody here. That means they carry our people to slave. The first thing you would automatically do, we ain't have time. Remember Saul? When the army was of the Philistines, he called for the ephod too, remember? And when the priest was called, he said, oh, stay on, hold on, we ain't got time for that. And he charged out after them. David is in the same kind of position, but David is asking God, this is the inevitable, you notice what you should do, but David is saying, even though everybody and everything says that's the sensible thing to do, is go and pursue and try to bring your people back, right? Because it means they're not dead. Otherwise, the bodies would be here. So the automatic thing would be to run. But David is so checked now. David is this realize now that he's putting not only his life in God's hand, but he's now trusting God with all of it. And he's saying, if God decides that I don't go behind them, we ain't going. I ain't going. This is the point David is at. If God says, stay here and die, that's what I gonna do. Because see, everything we do, we're running to save our life, running to make our life happier. regardless as to what God wants us to go through at this time. That's why David is in this position, because David was tired of the struggle. And that's our thing. We get tired of struggling, tired of not being able to do this, tired of not being able to do that. And so, and you know what the big thing is? Finances, hey, with us. So whatever it takes to keep us from going hungry tonight, whatever it takes to keep us from being without power or roof over our head, that's what we're about to do. And David is showing you that no, if God said be without food, be without power, He's all you need. Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from God, because we realize that God could sustain us without the sustainer, which we call food for our bodies. God is able to keep us. And when we come to the point where we trust God to that extent, I mean, would we need more than food? We need air to breathe. And we're saying, look, God, I trust you right now more than the air I need to breathe. Why? Because He controls it. But we think we control it. And so David got to the point where he is saying, God, you tell me if we should go. You let me know. Because I ain't going if we sing them song, wherever He leads, we'll follow. That time God bringing up the rear and we in the front, but we singing. David is asking God, shall I pursue after this truth? And not only that, should I, even if you say we're to pursue, are we going to overtake them? Shall I pursue the truth? Shall I overtake them? Is it going to be victorious? Because he doesn't realize God could tell you pursue, and you could be consumed by the truth. Because all of this could be part of the judgment, because he already realized now he in the wrong place, from the wrong vantage point. He should be with his people. In fact, in other words, God might have told him, he didn't ask God to be in Ziklag. He didn't ask God to join the Philistine. God may have told him, then he could have been more certain and assured. Shall I pursue this truth? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, look at that, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them. You see what verse 8 say? This David, who done been in enemy territory and remembered God from that time, he's turned to God now with his whole heart, and God answers. You know, one of the reasons when we go from God for a long time, and then when we do pray, we pray and say, now God ain't gonna answer me because it's so long, and I gotta do something and work my way back into God's favor. We gotta do something to butter God up to answer us. David is outside doing his own thing for the Lord, because it says David spoke to himself, and whatever answer returned to himself, that's what he was working with. David speaks to God, and God gives him an answer, and a favorable one. He said, go and pursue them, you shall overtake. That means he gonna win. He gonna win. God is giving the enemy back in his hand. And this is an encouragement to us, so that if we at this time find ourselves in a position where we have been walking in our own way, going according to how we feel, what we think, and gauging our life on that, making our decisions from that, it is showing us that once we turn to God with our whole heart, turn to God, He will answer you. For thou shalt surely overtake them. And without fail, look at that, recover. Recover what? Everything that the enemy took from Ziklag, God is telling him he's going to get it all back. David is a type of Christ. God is showing us even from now that Jesus taught in praying, All that the Father has given him, he has lost none, nothing. God has given David these things. God has given him his family. God is in control of his life. And God is telling him, you will recover everything that the enemy took from you. We sing a song like that. Take back whatever. But we sing that as if we doing that on our own. God is promising David that he would be successful. Everything that he left there in Ziklag, he's going to get it back. And of course, he's going to get back everything and more. And that's where the surely come in. For thou shalt surely overtake. So you're going to get back all that you had and more. So David went. He and how much people? The same 600. And guess who these 600 is? These them same men who were about to stone him. Because when they realized that David wasn't even looking to them, and David wasn't even criticizing them, because David realized that they had a right to feel how they feel. David even in defending himself from them. Him and these 600, because why? When they realized that David ain't like Saul, David ain't like y'all. Y'all first opportunity is to kill everybody who y'all blaming for who y'all lost. David is turning to God. Because David realized killing me ain't gonna get them back. Bickering with each other ain't gonna get them back. We need now to seek the Lord, the only one who could direct us whether we're going to get them back or not. We need to look to the Lord. And so when they see David in concentrating on all that weeping and wailing and things, David looking to God. This is where his help will come. Because definitely ain't going to come from these men who fallen down drunk with crying and distress. David turns to the Lord. And when they see that, that was an encouragement even to them. So David encouraged them by turning to the Lord. David strengthened them. They got strength by David turning to the Lord. So David went, he and his 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Bezor, where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which was so faint that they could not go over the brook Bezor. So this, and I believe this the original 400, them 400 who were with David at the first, because these men, because of the journeyings, we see in distance and the rugged terrain that they have to go over. But these fellas, they remember they done been with the Philistine, done march all the way there, march back, then march over here trying to get to their loved ones. They couldn't make it any further. And so the 200 of them had to stay behind. Now David have the original, the Fantastic Four, I guess. The Fantastic 400. Yeah, the time is on 10:47. Finish?
Yeah.
And they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he did eat. And they made him drink water. I mean, this like the gospel right in here. They found an Egyptian in the field. That's an example of us out in sin. Devil got us down. We dead in sin, because this one he next to death. And he was left behind by his master. You see, we out there fooling around, letting the devil be our master. And when he done abuse and misuse and do all he could with us, he leave us to die. And he's our master who's supposed to be looking out for us. We need to call on another master. Morning. And they brought him to David, type of Christ. We out in the field of sin, dying, dead and without Christ in this evil world. And this world is what killing us, following behind our master, doing his bid and control, being faithful to him, you know. And we find ourselves when we out in sin being more faithful than our master out in sin. And when this master redeem us, when this master pick us up and bring us life, water, rescue us, Jesus, we find ourselves as we go on in Christ, we become less faithful to him than we were when we were out in sin. We'll stay out in sin and complain, but we ain't coming home to Christ. We'll stay out there in sin. Soon as we get here, we start complaining, and we don't want to work for him no more. All of a sudden, he owe us, and if he want us to continue to work, he got to butter us up. Do this for us and do that for us. Other than that, we be like unfaithful servants in his house. But we work faithfully for the devil. So here's this guy found in the field. And they gave him a piece of cake. In other words, David them sustained him, brought life back into him. And so, if he bringing life back into you, what you think you should do? That's the one who you're going to serve. And now we going to make, you saving me? Please don't give me back to that master. Don't send me back out there in that world. And he promised that if you come to me, you belong to me forever. You going out there and work for that master, and that master ain't want you, but as long as he could use you. But Jesus said, if you come, I'll never turn you down. I'll never send you back. And we doubt that because we work for that master so faithfully out there in the field. He kick us out when we don't do what he wants. And so we feel like Jesus could do the same thing to us. And he said, no, I will never leave you. Never forsake you. This master forsake this man in the field, left him to die. Leave him to die out there. Jesus said, I'll never do that to you. Come unto me, all that are weary, heavy laden. Come, I will give you rest. And he said, come eat and drink. You don't even need money. Come and eat and drink. And that's what David doing with this one. They're feeding him. For he had eaten, look, no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. That's what his master did to him. Left him out there in the field of sin. And David said unto him, to whom belongest thou? Who do you belong to? Who is your master? And whence art thou? And he said, I am a young man, an Egyptian. Egypt, we look at that as a type of the world. Egypt. Servant to who? Look, servant to who? An Amalekite. You serving an Amalekite? And my master, what did he do? Oh my goodness, we need to see the gospel in this. My master left me. Why? Because 3 days ago, I fell sick. Had no control of it. He didn't try to sustain me. He didn't try to make me well, and whole gang of them. They didn't try to put me on one beast and carry me over. Even after all of that, and look at this. They even didn't leave you 3 days ago. You should at least be left with supplies, eh? They even didn't leave you with supplies. At least water. And don't tell me they had it because they just read the flag. You mean your master, even when they get wherever they was going to send somebody back to come get you? But that's us. out in sin, and the devil kicking us right, left, and center. Look at what the devil is doing. And people wouldn't stop serving him. His master leave him to die. And he said, we made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites and upon the coast. He's telling them all these places where they done raid and had all this substance now. Look at all the places his master them done raid and took everything and left him out there like that. Even if they did say, you know what, don't burn the city, let's leave him in that one till he get better and then he could catch up to us. They're burning us, they go. And leave him to die this slow, painful death. Even if they did put him to death, put him out of his misery. No. We made an invasion upon the south. And look at what he's saying. Look at what he's saying. He said, we made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites and upon the coast, which belonged to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag with fire. See? All of these. And he's saying we, which means he was doing it too. He was there help. He didn't have no, because David understand, he is a slave. He worked for them. He have to do what his master say. So he was serving his master faithfully. It's his master who failed him. Because he say we, that means while he was up and well, while he was in his strength. Look at how, and you find people give all their youth to the devil. Give all their youth to the devil, then leave them between a rock and a hard place. No more use for them, no more taste for the world, but they have nothing else to look forward to. After all of that, he had nothing else to look forward to but death. They didn't even leave him a canteen. 3 days ago, he should have still had supplies. You see the amount of places they done raid? There's no reason why after 3 days he should not have had some stuff. And if he was well enough, he would have been able to catch up to them, but he couldn't because he knew where they went. He knew where to find them. So they didn't mean for him to catch up. They expected for him to die. So I guess they thinking, why leave our canteen? Why leave our food? He's sick, he can't make use of them. But you don't know if he may get well. You ain't no doctor, you know what he's sick with. But he gone and he did all of this for them. And David said unto him, canst thou bring me down to this company? Just a point. You realize that David had gotten instruction from God to go down. Hey, but look at this. God could have told him exactly where to go. Because God didn't, because there's work for us to do. God expects for us to do his work diligently, just as if we were, the same way David could have gone and thought to himself and make up all these roads and avenues to go. God is now putting in place and showing how, because see what God is showing him is, God directed him there. And you know, we talk about divine providence and all that. Look at how God in his divine providence is working things out for David and this sinner out in the field. Look at it. God allows us to go through various things because God is also using us while he's using us to minister life. It's also to minister life as we go. You know what we say? And my living shall not be in vain. If God tell us go there, we would not take time to recognize and to see what others are going through and seeing how, because here it is, this man is out in the field and God told them exactly where to go. They would not have had need of this man or even to see this man. But God is directing our path, and as we go, we're bringing souls to the kingdom. As we go, we're sharing God. We're telling about God. Other than that, it would be no reason for David them to show this man love. They would have had no time for that. But here, God told them, yes, go. And on their way, they find this man who needs help. Not only does this man needs help, this man needs deliverance. Because you think this man won't go back to his master now? He'll be a fool. He will be a fool. Who you think would be his master now? Mm. And David said unto him, canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, swear unto me by God. You see that? Because he done been gypped by another master. Look at him. Swear unto me that thou wilt neither kill me. Why? Because if you don't kill me, delivering me into my master's hand is just like killing me. Because on top of that, how else they gonna know you all find them? See, they wasn't thinking about all of that when they leave him there to die. He know your route. He got the itinerary. Y'all should have carried him. And so he's asking them to make a covenant. And when we read the Bible and see the things God has said to us and the heritage God has set up for us, the promises God has made to us, David them is making him a promise of life. Christ has made us a promise. Look at the Bible, full of promises to us. I think we time up here. Oh, a minute. Okay. Let me just read this and we'll have to finish this up tomorrow evening. Hold on, girls. Nor deliver me into the hand of my master, verse 15, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he had brought him down, behold, they were, look at this, look at this. Behold, look at this now. Okay. And when he had brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating, drinking, dancing, and left that man out there to die. You see that? Anyway, we'll have to finish this up. Too much of them out there waiting. We'll finish this up tomorrow evening at 6. I'm sorry we didn't get to finish Zoom. You could comments or questions you can hold till tomorrow as we move into our service. We're late. Father, we give you thanks and praise for this lesson. We ask that you continue to speak to us through your word, God, and cause us to walk faithfully before you, remembering your promises, standing on them, God, and living a life that is pleasing to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you as we move into our service. Okay, let's move on over. No, it's not. Thank you.